Hello, my name is Earl Taylor. I'm the Chief Marketing and Chief Knowledge Officer at the Marketing Science Institute, now part of the ARF. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here to today's webinar on how to leverage foundational insights to inform a test and learn culture. As many of you know, I hope, MSI is a unique nonprofit organization that brings together top academics from around the world with a variety of corporate sponsors. We fund research by academics on the important marketing topics chosen by our corporate members, and then we disseminate the results of that research in a variety of ways. And we're very pleased today to do this through a webinar, which involves one of our corporate sponsors, Kantar, and their partner, Snap. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you today our two speakers. Jeremy Jones is the VP of Marketing Attribution at Kantar, where he does marketing, and previously was with Marketing Evolution, Raytheon, and Nielsen in his career. He comes to us with a master's in organizational psychology, interestingly enough, from University of New Haven. And Takeshi is from Snap, where he does ads research and insights. He's the lead there, also working in augmented reality. He comes to us with a degree in neuroscience, and appropriately enough was formerly at Mindshare. So together, the two of them will be talking today about how to understand what works in the Snap advertising ecosystem and how to design the appropriate ad placement, frequency, and that sort of thing to achieve maximum results. So we're very pleased to have both Jeremy and Takeshi today to share their insights about that.
Cool. Nice to see everybody. Thank you for the intro, Earl. Can dive right in. So my name is Takeshi, and I lead augmented reality ads effectiveness research here at Snap.
And hey, everyone, I'm Jeremy Jones. I am Vice President of Marketing Attribution at Kantar, and I head up our Balanced Attribution full funnel omni-channel attribution product. Well then, so Snap ads, story ads, commercials, filters, lenses. Oh my. Snap has a plethora of different formats, ad types, each with their own unique requirements when it comes to planning and creative within the Snap platform to get the most effectiveness, to effectively get the most out of the ad and the campaign. Because there is such a mix of formats and so many options, it is important to have careful planning and testing to start off on the right foot to maximize campaign performance. And this led to Snap advertising partners to often pose questions like, what products should we use? What is the right frequency? The right frequency across products and audiences? How do we get the most out of our creative? What are the best creative best practices to maximize impact? And how do we leverage a combination of ad products for the most positive synergistic effect within our campaign? Snap and Kantar wanted to tackle these challenges, wanted to answer these questions, provide answers to Snap's advertisers. And to do so, we had to have a way to take all the brand lift studies, all the continuous measurement that's going on within the partnership, and analyze it in a way that looks across verticals, across campaigns to really showcase what drove lift across KPIs like ad awareness and intent. And that ultimately led us to the solution that Talk will take us through right now.
Totally. And in partnership with Jeremy and the rest of the Balanced Attribution team, we were able to develop 13 playbooks that were specific to a vertical and country, which enabled our sales team to go to market with foundational insights to kickstart relationships with new accounts or build upon existing ones. This is especially important as we're onboarding new partners to get them familiarized with the platform and to start them off on the right foot when it comes to campaign planning on Snapchat. And so within these playbooks, we illustrated the contributors to success, which stack ranks variables like frequency, creative, and ad formats with each other to understand the importance of each in driving performance. Additionally, we double-click into each of these factors to talk about recommended budget allocations between content ads and camera ads. And drilling further down, we identified how creative diversity can play into performance, in addition to gains in brand metrics through frequency. So in order to ensure that our sales team were equipped with a deeper understanding of how these playbooks were created, we also developed a methodology accompaniment to talk through the details. In fact, Jeremy will provide a high-level overview of what balanced attribution is and how it was leveraged in the context of this study.
And what balanced attribution is at a high level, it's an advanced modeling framework that leverages recurrent neural networks, ingesting event-level media delivery data, timestamped impressions with all the attributes of the exposure, creative attributes, ad attributes at a impression delivered level, along with user outcomes, user level brand lifts, user level outcomes. And because the recurrent neural network is looking at each individual exposure sequentially and the incremental lift that it provides, it allows the ability to understand how variables like ad format, frequency, and creative features contribute to lift both independently and also together in a synergistic way. And that helps publishers with media planning, with insights to guide ad campaigns. And through this, there's outputs such as campaign playbooks with foundational insights and more tactical level optimizations for campaigns.
So all in all, the playbooks that we created were a back-to-back one-sheeter that looks and feels like Snap. We illustrated the campaign drivers of success, budget allocation recommendations, insights into creative, as well as frequency. And ultimately, in order to action on these insights, we invited advertisers to put them to the test and identify how they can iterate on these learnings in order to find ones that are specific to their brand. And secondly, we have accompaniments to the playbook that showcases the methodology as well as sampling data that built the actual models, which in turn created the playbooks. In addition to the methodology, we provide a description of each section that can be found on the playbook. This was a way for us to break down the complexity of the analysis and to prepare our teams for questions that they may get from their partners. And so going back to our top line findings, we wanted to make sure that we were answering some of the most basic questions we get about our complex ad stack. We wanted to help advertisers understand what drove performance in terms of format, creative, and frequency so that they have a basic place to start when they're creating their media plan. To follow on to that, a guide to planning budget across our ad stack was pertinent. And to drill down further into the media, providing insights into the number of creatives as well as what the campaign should have included was a natural follow. And ultimately, basic insights around frequency, while hard to control for, will get marketers thinking about how to plan for it and to start thinking about interesting measurement frameworks to test against it. When all of these foundational insights are combined into one, it creates a starting point for our clients in the journey to maximize performance on our platform. We're excited to dive in and show you all that we've identified as Snap foundational insights.
Yeah. And the starting point of all of this, of all foundational insights, is contributors to success. What drove lift across KPIs, across the funnel for advertisers on Snap? In my career in marketing analytics, one question that I've heard the most often was always, why did media perform the way it did? We can measure ROI, we can measure what the performance was. Why did it perform that way? What were the reasons for it working? And how do we dial that up? And one of the reasons why I was so excited about partnering with Snap and the work that we did together was really drilling down into the contributors of success and what drove the lift across awareness and intent on the Snap platform. Looking at the top of the funnel with ad awareness, frequency was the largest contributor, with 42% of the impact of success on driving awareness, ad awareness, coming back to frequency. It highlights the importance of staying in front of the consumers, having a steady drumbeat and flighting strategy in order to stay top of mind. As we think about leveraging these foundational insights to build a test and learn program to test what works best for yourself as an advertiser, this is a really compelling finding, because when we think of optimizing and where to tackle first for awareness, optimizing the frequency and testing and learning into different frequency levels is what has the most leverage at the top of the funnel. Moving down the funnel, we see that frequency still matters significantly for intent. 35% of what drove intent was having the right frequency. There is a shift towards ad format as we move down the funnel. For a KPI that is closer to conversion, consumers responded much more to what type of ads, what formats they were being served, and what that mix was at an individual level. And here it's important for, as you think test and learn and finding the right mix for yourself as an advertiser, to focus as we move down the funnel on ad format and being able to optimize into the right mix to maximize your performance. Moving on to the next slide, it really highlights a perfect example of this. On the last slide, we saw the importance of ad format and driving intent. It is especially interesting to see that as we move up budget levels, higher budgets, there's a shift in allocations that maximize, that drive intent more towards camera ads. And it highlights that there isn't a one size fits all optimal mix across ad formats, across budget levels. It changes as the budget, as the campaign changes, and how much frequency is in the campaign. And this is really because at higher levels of budget, campaigns tend to saturate audiences, especially if there's only a single format that is chosen within the mix. And this is where a multi-format approach is important, as it allows for incremental frequency and more diverse, differentiated frequency that staves off diminishing returns and increases the incrementality of that response curve, because you're putting a differentiated exposure in front of your audiences. And that changes incrementality, and that drives more upside for advertisers.
And Jeremy's point builds on another set of foundational insights that we at Snap had uncovered before we even kicked off this balanced attribution project with Kantar. Time and time again, we've seen that a multi-format approach to campaign planning on Snapchat, which includes both camera and content formats, drive stronger performance. So for example, we saw multi-format campaigns utilizing both a camera ad and content ad, driving 2.3x higher conversion lift than campaigns that only utilize a single format. In addition to that, we also saw that with our brand lift studies, that these multi-format campaigns utilizing both a camera ad and content ad were 2.1x as likely to drive significant lifts in purchase intent. Now with balanced attribution, we've gone closer to how our partners should be thinking about these multi-format campaigns.
It's so interesting to see the multi-format approach and how effective it is, and shedding a light on that performance and having the synergistic effect across ad types. We are also seeing that there's additional factors that drive performance in Snapchat, and there's additional opportunities for a differentiated frequency. One of which was diversity of creative message in a campaign. Users that saw at the individual level, individuals that saw more messages had a more favorable response to the campaign, had significantly higher indexes on how media drove incremental purchase intent with the campaigns. Those campaigns that had 11 plus frequency and users that are 11 plus creatives within their campaign, and users that were exposed to that many different messages within the campaign, saw a 263 percent index on performance at driving intent. And this is similar to what was seen with ad formats, with the ability to differentiate frequency to test different creative mixes and format mixes to have different messages within the campaign really has power in elongating the diminishing returns curve and making the campaign more incremental at each of those sequential exposures to drive performance for advertisers. And speaking of response curves, we're now going to turn our attention to a frequency curve and the response lift to exposure within the average campaign that was measured. And what really jumps out is the room for growth. So much of the marketing analytics industry has been built on the famous want to make a quote of 50% of ad spend being wasted and not knowing which 50%. And in this industry, in this space, we've gotten really good at identifying the waste and driving towards efficiency. The flip side of that coin, though, is growth and the importance of continuing to drive more growth within your consumers. And as an advertiser, asking the question of where is there opportunity to grow? This work here really highlights an opportunity to grow. At current campaign levels, advertisers are capturing 77% of the possible impact on intent within the platform, within their campaigns. There's room for more, though. 23% possible growth by scaling up frequency. And if we think about typical year-over-year goals of 3%, 5% growth, same-store growth, looking for avenues to capture that, to be able to see a response curve where it highlights the upside of continuing to scale and continuing to test into higher frequencies, leveraging that foundational insight to test at scale and capture potentially more growth within your campaigns.
And so these foundational insights are just the beginning. Now, all of these insights are going to need to be tailored across different brands, different categories, and different products, depending on where they're starting out. And so it's important to note that every campaign performs differently. And so it's similar to when I'm cooking. I start with a recipe that is the foundation, and then I start experimenting with different seasonings, spices, vegetables, and other ingredients in order to tailor the meal to my needs, similar to how a marketer would start tailoring each campaign to their needs. And so as we continuously test different offerings and different levers and pulleys that we can adjust to optimize these campaigns to drive the most impact, and finally developing a brand-specific strategy and brand-specific foundational insights that actually restarts the learning process in order to continue to evolve with the changing times. And to help our advertising partners take these foundational insights further, Snap offers media incentives that rotate with the seasons and align with high priority learning agenda items that we see across all of our partners. These incentives typically align with these categories that you're seeing here. For example, we constantly launch new products and tools that advertisers can leverage to build and optimize their campaigns. And in order to assess performance as they hit the market, we provide media incentives to activate and measure its impact. One recent product launch was with Catalog Power Shopping Lenses, which is a powerful commerce format built to present multiple products from a product catalog into a single lens, our augmented reality format. These shopping lenses pull in product information such as product name and price from product catalog in a dynamic way and visually present this information in the lens product cards on screen. These shopping lenses were designed to provide specific information to Snapchatters as a way to seamlessly interact with, try on, and tap to purchase multiple products in a single lens by swiping through the lens product cards. It's a very complex format, and we want advertisers to start to test it, which is why we've aligned incentives for testing. Additionally, we want to make sure we provide the opportunity for advertisers to put our insights to the test and to actually prove that these foundations work. For example, in the past, we provided incentives to conduct an incremental lens test in which a multi-cell measurement framework is leveraged to test a business as usual media plan compared to one that also includes a lens. And we want to carry this through to iteratively improving upon foundations. So for example, once advertisers have understood what a foundational media plan can look like on Snap, we provide opportunities to and tweak that setup to optimize it for their brand, which could come in the form of, for example, a budget allocation test. And with all of this being said, we hope that you walk away with a better sense of how we leverage Kantar Balanced Attribution to break down our complex ad stack into actionable foundational insights. From there, realize that there are huge opportunities for brands to build on it and to start investing more in camera ads as part of a multi-format campaign, which then lends itself to a more diversified creative mix and accumulation of frequency. And finally, as the world around us continues to evolve, brands will need to continue testing and learning across their entire portfolio of partners, and that we here at Snap and Kantar are here to help. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. Takeshi, that was very interesting. And I think in the greatest sense of the word, it was intuitive. Once you saw the findings, they seemed to make sense. But to an important point, you were able to quantify some of the effects that we were describing. And that therein lies, I think, the advance that you've made with this approach. So we do have some questions, and I encourage the audience again to submit others, use the Q&A function. Jim had a question about those high engagement campaigns. To what extent could you or did you try to control for prior interest in the product or service? I noticed you had like 52 different campaigns, so presumably there was good variability there in terms of the product category and so forth. But was there any attempt to kind of understand who the audience is in relation to the product and their level of engagement pre-existing the campaigns?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one, and Jeremy, you could probably build on this further. But with regards to how we ingested the data, like we mentioned, there's both the media delivery data, so at the impression level, as well as the respondent level data. And obviously, for our in order to acquire this data in the first place, we need to make sure that there's a framework around a test and control cell. And so as we gathered the data, we did get data from both these test cells that did get exposed to media, as well as a control cell that did not get any exposure to media. And so when we start ingesting the data, we're able to get respondent level files from both of those different cells that can account for those initial prior engagement levels that the respondents might have already. And so that builds on top of what we have in terms of exposed respondents.
Yeah, a really important part of that methodology is we're actively twinning the sample so that that control sample looks like the exposed sample outside of exposures. And that way we can pick up within the neural networks what that incremental response was.
That's a great point. And so again, it almost goes without saying that people who are following a certain product category talking about it on Snap are actually interested in that, but you did this very carefully controlled test and control comparison. So the lift you noted was incremental to any prior interest there might have been. And a kind of related question, Charles had a question about whether the high engagement campaigns, did they show a different type of decay? Were you able to track some of the brand metrics after the fact and see, there's a classic wear in, wear out idea behind advertising. Did you see that there was a fall off? Did these effects persist longer? Was that part of the study?
Yeah, I can tackle that first, and again, Jeremy, feel free to hop in whenever. But I think with regards to intent decay, that's typically related to creative fatigue. And so as we incorporated all these different studies across categories, across countries, we didn't focus on the rate of decay for specific creatives. And so that's why we saw that curve built out as it was, that in general, when you accumulate frequency, you're more likely to drive intent. This is something that we've seen with conversion data as well, that with higher frequency levels, there's a higher likelihood that someone will make a purchase. Now, I do want to speak on the creative fatigue point because that is a very important question for us to answer, especially with regards to campaigns that have very minimal amount of creative differentiation. And those are the points, those are the types of campaigns that we see showing signs of creative fatigue. Now, this, again, going back to the actual sample here, we chose very diversified sets of campaigns. We chose ones with multi-format approaches, and we also did choose one that did have lift. So in order to understand what's actually driving those lifts, and so we saw a very minimal amount of creative fatigue in terms of the campaigns that we selected for this campaign, for this study.
Absolutely. And one important note there is that we were looking within the study, we were looking at response curves and diminishing returns curves through a lens of a plethora of different cuts of the data based off of populations, users that were exposed to multiple formats, users that were exposed to just one ad format. And we did see differences in those response curves. The response curve that we highlighted in this presentation was an aggregate rolling up all the responses across the different populations. There was differences, and that's where the optimizations towards higher budgets, more ad formats, multi-ad formats, were really driven by those differences in decay rate and response and incrementality, that there was adding in multiple formats, you saw less decay in response with incremental exposure, incremental frequency. And that's why the higher budgets, higher frequency campaigns, optimizations shifted in that direction of adding more formats into the mix.
I think that I was about to pony up a question that Jason had early on, and I think you answered it spot on, and that is what was the appropriate frequency to get the best engagement? But obviously it's going to vary by advertiser, by category. What you displayed in that curve that you shared with us was the average across all these campaigns. But even at that level, it showed there was considerable, as you put it, room for improvement. Although it did look at about, was it 34 exposures or whatever, you hit that was the beginning of diminishing returns perhaps. And that would be where you do the classic cost benefit analysis. How much does each additional ad exposure cost you versus what it gets you? It's interesting. We have a working paper in our library, which is available to the public, that looks at Snap conversations. This goes back a few years ago. And against some people's expectations, consumers using Snap to communicate with each other were actually more engaged in the conversation. And the interpretation was it was precisely because it was ephemeral, that it would go away. It was not going to be, you wouldn't have a record you could go back and look at later. So you had to pay attention. And we used to call that conversation. You actually used to have to listen to each other and respond. And so it was. It's interesting to see in some ways what your findings validate that is maybe the unique feature about Snap as a platform for communicating with consumers is they do pay attention because it is ephemeral. There's not going to be the kind of record that there might be in other types of engagements. So again, it's interesting. It seems to be obvious in retrospect, but what you have done is to really put some numbers on that advertisers can use. I think with that, we're very close to time, but maybe just give each of you a last chance to summarize, say what you would like the audience to have as a key takeaway.
Yeah, sure. I can start and I'll just wrap it up really quickly. But like I mentioned, this is just the beginning, and we want to be able to support you in your journey and understanding what works best for you and your brand. So again, feel free to reach out to me. My email is talk@snap.com.
And I would just second what Talk said there is these are foundational insights that serve as the beginning of planning. Every campaign, every vertical will be different. Every creative mix will be different. And it's important to use these foundational insights to then build into planning, build into a test and learn program to continue to optimize for your specific campaign.
Well, again, thanks to you both for a very interesting presentation, good discussion. Again, I want to thank the audience for being with us. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Check out our website from time to time. I hope you're on our mailing list for updates about that. There will be a recording of this session that you will receive a link to shortly afterwards. And again, we encourage you to reach out to the presenters if you have additional questions. But again, thanks to both, and thanks to the audience, and we'll look forward to seeing you at our next lunch lecture or webinar.
Cool. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye all.